homeless boy brings a baby to the hospital. When the doctor asks where the baby came from, his answer shocks everyone. It was a cold night in downtown Chicago, and the last traces of daylight had disappeared into the dark sky. Ethan, a 12-year-old boy with a tattered hoodie and sneakers too worn to keep out the chill, shuffled through an alley. He was searching the garbage bins for scraps, his empty stomach a constant reminder of the harshness of his life on the streets. A faint, unfamiliar sound interrupted his search. It was soft at first, almost blending with the distant hum of traffic. Then it grew louder, a cry fragile and weak. Ethan froze, straining to locate the source. Near a pile of cardboard boxes at the alley's end, something moved. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding. What he found made him gasp. Lying on a dirty blanket was a baby, its tiny face scrunched in distress as it cried faintly. Ethan knelt down, his breath visible in the cold air. Hey, where did you come from?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The baby didn't answer, of course, but its cries grew softer as he gently wrapped the blanket tighter around its small body. Ethan looked around the alley. There was no sign of anyone else, just darkness and the eerie glow of a distant streetlight. Whoever had left the baby here was long gone. He couldn't leave it. He didn't know much, but he knew it would freeze out here. Tightening his grip on the tiny bundle, Ethan began walking toward the city's lights. His mind raced. He didn't know where to go, but after a few minutes, he spotted a glowing sign. City Memorial Hospital. It loomed large and intimidating, but he knew he had no choice. Pushing open the heavy glass doors, Ethan stepped into the hospital lobby, immediately drawing the attention of a nurse behind the reception desk. The nurse, an older woman named Margaret, raised an eyebrow as she noticed the boy and the bundle in his arms. "Please, help," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "I found this baby in an alley. I think something's wrong." Margaret's expression shifted from suspicion to alarm as she hurried around the desk. "Oh my God," she muttered, reaching for the baby. "Where exactly did you find this child?" Ethan hesitated, reluctant to let go of the bundle. I found it near some boxes, down the alley behind the old laundromat," he stammered. "I didn't see anyone else. I swear." Margaret didn't press further. She called for a doctor, and moments later, Dr. Claire Jensen appeared. She was tall and calm, her movements quick but deliberate. She took the baby from Margaret's arms, her sharp eyes immediately assessing its condition. "Where did this baby come from?" Claire asked, her tone urgent but not unkind. "I found it in the alley," Ethan repeated, his voice firmer now. "It was all alone." Claire looked at him, her face softening. "You did the right thing bringing the baby here," she said. "But I need to ask, did you see anyone nearby? A car? Anything unusual?" Ethan shook his head. "No, just the baby. I don't know what happened." Claire nodded, her concern evident. "Stay here for a moment, okay? Don't go anywhere." Ethan sat down in the waiting area, his knees bouncing with nervous energy. The stark white lights made him feel even smaller than he already did. He looked down at his hands, now empty but still trembling slightly. In the neonatal unit, the baby was placed in an incubator as nurses worked quickly. Claire stood beside them, her mind racing. The infant was underweight, freezing cold, and clearly neglected. Someone had left this child to die, and the thought sent a wave of anger through her. "Let's stabilize the baby first," she told the team, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I'll notify the authorities." Back in the lobby, Ethan was still waiting when Claire returned, accompanied by a police officer named Michael. Michael was tall with a kind face, though his uniform and badge gave him an air of authority that made Ethan nervous. "Hi there," Michael said, crouching to Ethan's level. "I'm Officer Michael. Dr. Jensen told me you found the baby. Can you tell me what happened?" Ethan repeated his story, explaining how he had been searching for food when he heard the cries. "I didn't see anyone," he insisted. I couldn't leave it there." Michael nodded, scribbling in a small notebook. "You did the right thing," he said. "Not everyone would have done that." Ethan stayed silent, unsure of what to say. Michael looked at him for a moment, Do you have somewhere to go? Anyone to call? Ethan's stomach twisted. He shook his head. No, it's just me. Michael glanced at Claire, who stood with her arms crossed, clearly deep in thought. You've been living on the streets? She asked softly. Ethan hesitated but finally nodded. Yeah. Claire sighed, a mix of frustration and sadness flickering across her face. We'll figure something out, she said. But first, let's make sure the baby's okay. Ethan watched her leave again, his mind spinning. He didn't know what to expect, but something about Dr. Jensen made him feel that, for the first time in a long while, he might not be entirely alone. Ethan sat stiffly in the waiting area, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. Every so often, he glanced toward the hallway where Dr. Claire had disappeared with the baby. The stark whiteness of the hospital around him only seemed to amplify the emptiness he'd grown used to. After what felt like an eternity, Officer Michael returned. He crouched again, trying to meet Ethan's wary gaze. Ethan, he began, using the boy's name for the first time. The baby is stable, thanks to you. Now, I know you've been through a lot, but we need a little more information. Is there anything you can remember? Something unusual in the alley? Ethan shook his head firmly. There wasn't anyone, he said. Just the baby. I heard crying, and He hesitated, his voice faltering. I couldn't leave it there. Michael sighed, scribbling something in his notepad. Okay, he said finally. You've been honest, and I believe you. At that moment, Claire emerged from the hallway. She approached the pair, her expression a mix of relief and concern. The baby is stable for now, she said, addressing both of them. Then, turning to Ethan, she added, you really did something incredible tonight. You saved a life. Ethan looked down at his hands, unsure how to respond. Claire sat beside him, her tone softening. But now we need to talk about you. Do you have anywhere safe to go? Ethan shrugged, his shoulders tensing. I'm fine on my own, he muttered. Claire exchanged a glance with Michael, who stepped aside to make a phone call. Ethan couldn't hear much, but the words child services sent a jolt of panic through him. You're not in trouble, Ethan, Claire said, noticing his reaction. But living on the streets isn't safe. We want to help. I don't need help, Ethan shot back, his voice sharp. Claire held her hands up, her voice steady. I get it. You're used to looking out for yourself. But I think you've been carrying more than any kid your age should. Before Ethan could respond, Michael returned. We've got a temporary placement lined up, he said. They can take him tonight. Ethan's chest tightened. I'm not going anywhere, he said, his tone defiant. Michael crouched again, his expression calm but firm. Ethan, listen. We're not trying to make things harder for you. We just want you to have a roof over your head and some food while we figure this out. Claire intervened, her voice gentler. Just for one night. You've already done so much for someone else tonight. Let us do something for you. Ethan's resolve wavered under her steady gaze. Finally, he sighed. Fine. Just one night. The placement was a small shelter for homeless youth a few blocks away. Michael drove Ethan there in his squad car, the silence between them heavy. When they arrived, a social worker named Rachel greeted them. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a voice that immediately put Ethan on edge with its warmth. Hi, Ethan, she said, crouching slightly as if not to overwhelm him. We're glad you're here. Let's get you settled. Okay? Ethan nodded stiffly, keeping his eyes on the floor. As Rachel led him to a small, shared dorm room, she tried to make conversation. I heard what you did tonight. Not many kids would have been brave enough to help like that. Ethan didn't respond. His guard was up, every muscle in his body tense. She opened the door to the dorm. Inside were 3 neatly made beds, one of them clearly prepared for him. This is your space for now, Rachel said, stepping aside to let him in. If you need anything, I'm right down the hall. Ethan stepped inside, his eyes darting around. The room was small but clean, with thick blankets folded neatly on each bed. It was warmer than anywhere he'd slept in months, but it still didn't feel safe. Good night, Ethan, Rachel said softly, leaving him alone. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the night swirling in his mind. The baby, the hospital, the questions. His hands still felt the weight of the tiny bundle he'd carried. Somewhere out there, he thought someone had left that baby to die. And as much as he wanted to forget it all in sleep, a part of him couldn't let go of the questions clawing at the back of his mind. The following morning, Ethan woke to sunlight filtering through the dormitory window. For a moment, he didn't move, disoriented by the quiet warmth around him. The bed was firm but far better than the concrete and cardboard he was used to. Still, the unfamiliarity of the place put him on edge. He slipped out of bed, quickly pulling on his hoodie. The other beds were empty, and the dorm was silent except for the faint hum of activity from the hallway. Hesitant but curious, Ethan ventured out, following the scent of breakfast. In the common area, Rachel greeted him with a smile. "Good morning, Ethan," she said. "There's some food in the kitchen if you're hungry." Ethan hesitated, scanning the room. A few other kids sat at the tables, eating quietly. They didn't pay him much attention, which was a relief. He shuffled toward the kitchen, where a simple breakfast of toast and scrambled eggs awaited. He ate quickly, keeping his head down. Before long, Officer Michael arrived. Spotting Ethan, he walked over, his expression a mix of seriousness and encouragement. "How are you doing this morning?" Ethan shrugged. "Fine, I guess." Michael pulled up a chair. "Good. Because I need your help with something." Ethan looked up, wary. "What kind of help?" Michael leaned in slightly. "We're trying to figure out what happened with that baby you found. Who left them there and why. You're the only person who might have seen or heard anything useful." Ethan frowned, shaking his head. "I already told you. I didn't see anyone." "I know," Michael said, his voice calm, "but sometimes little details stick out later." "Was there anything unusual in the alley? Anything at all?" Ethan thought for a moment. He had replayed the scene in his mind countless times since last night. The crying, the cardboard boxes, the biting cold. But then something surfaced, a faint memory he hadn't fully registered at the time. Ethan hesitated. There was a smell, like flowers, maybe, but weird, like something strong. Michael nodded, jotting this down. "Good, that's something. Anything else?" Ethan shook his head. "No, just the baby and that smell." Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and stood. "All right, if you remember anything else, let me know." As Michael walked away, Rachel approached with a gentle smile. "Ethan, do you want to talk for a bit?" He stiffened. "About what?" "Anything. Or nothing at all," she said. "It's up to you." Ethan hesitated, but something in Rachel's tone made him relent. She led him to a quiet corner, where they sat on an old but comfortable couch. "You've had a rough time," Rachel began. "But what you did last night shows how strong you are." Ethan looked away, fidgeting with his sleeves. "I just didn't want the baby to die." Rachel nodded. "That says a lot about who you are, Ethan. But I also think it's okay to let people help you. You don't have to do everything alone." Her words struck something deep in him, but he wasn't ready to respond. Instead, he changed the subject. "What's going to happen to the baby?" Rachel's expression softened. "The doctors are taking care of the baby, and child services will step in to find a safe place." Ethan frowned, something twisting in his chest. "So they'll just give it to someone else?" "They'll do their best to find a good family," Rachel assured him. "But Ethan, you've already given that baby the best chance by bringing them to the hospital." Ethan nodded slowly, her words lingering in his mind. Meanwhile, at City Memorial Hospital, Dr. Claire Jensen stood in the neonatal unit, reviewing the baby's chart. The child had stabilized overnight, but Claire couldn't shake the unease in her gut. Something about the situation didn't add up. Margaret, the nurse, entered the room. "Any updates on the police investigation?" she asked. Claire shook her head. "Not yet, but I've got a bad feeling about this. The baby's condition suggests neglect, but leaving them in an alley like that, it's more than neglect. It feels deliberate." Margaret sighed. "Who would do something like that?" Claire didn't have an answer. A moment later, Michael called her, his voice steady but urgent. "We've got a lead," he said. "There's a surveillance camera near the alley. The footage might give us something. Claire's heart quickened. When can we see it? I'll send it over as soon as we have it, Michael replied. Claire hung up, staring at the tiny form in the incubator. She placed a gentle hand on the clear plastic. We'll figure this out, she murmured. I promise. That night, Ethan lay awake in the dorm, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the image of the baby from his thoughts. Their fragile cries, the desperation in their tiny body. And now, the faint scent of flowers he had noticed lingered in his memory. Somewhere out there, someone had left that baby behind. And even though Ethan had done all he could, the questions still haunted him. The next morning, Ethan was back in the shelter's common area when Officer Michael returned, holding a manila folder. His presence immediately drew Rachel's attention, and she motioned Ethan to join them in a quiet corner. Michael sat down, setting the folder on the table. Ethan, remember the camera I mentioned near the alley? We've got the footage. Ethan's stomach twisted. What did you see? Michael opened the folder, revealing a few blurry black and white stills. He pushed them toward Ethan. This was taken a few minutes before you arrived. See here? Ethan leaned in. One of the images showed a shadowy figure in the alley, partially obscured by a stack of crates. The person's outline suggested they were wearing a long coat, and something in their stance felt hurried, almost frantic. That's someone dropping off the baby? Ethan guessed, his voice low. Michael nodded. Looks that way. We don't have a clear view of their face, but we're working on enhancing the footage. There's something else too. He slid another photo forward, showing what looked like a small bouquet of flowers lying near the cardboard boxes. Recognize this? Ethan's eyes widened. That's the smell, he said, his voice trembling. I smelled flowers when I found the baby. Good memory, Michael said. We collected the flowers as evidence. They were fresh, which means whoever left them was there not long before you. Rachel, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Flowers? That doesn't make sense. Why would someone leave a baby with flowers? Michael exhaled slowly, his face darkening. That's what we're trying to figure out. Was it guilt? A message? We don't know yet. Ethan stared at the photo, his mind spinning. The more he thought about it, the stranger it all seemed. What happens if you find them? He asked, his voice hesitant. Michael looked at him carefully. If we find the person responsible, they'll be questioned. It's a crime to abandon a baby like that. But we also need to understand why it happened. Ethan nodded, though his unease only grew. At City Memorial Hospital, Dr. Claire stood in her office, her eyes glued to the same surveillance stills that Michael had shared with Ethan. The flowers puzzled her. She couldn't reconcile the image of neglect with the gesture of leaving fresh flowers. Margaret entered, holding a clipboard. Claire, the baby's condition is improving. The little one's responding well to the care. Claire smiled faintly. That's good news. She hesitated, her gaze falling back to the photos. But Margaret, doesn't this whole situation feel strange to you? Margaret nodded. The flowers? Definitely. It almost feels personal, doesn't it? Claire leaned back in her chair, deep in thought. Exactly. This wasn't just someone tossing a baby away. There's more to this. Margaret sighed. Let's hope the police figure it out. In the meantime, we've done our part. Claire's jaw tightened. I'm not sure our part is over yet. That evening, Ethan couldn't sleep. The shelter was quiet, but his mind wasn't. He kept thinking about the shadowy figure in the photo, the bouquet of flowers, and the baby's frail cries. He sat up, pulling the blankets around his shoulders. Deep down, he felt a connection to the baby, an unspoken bond born of shared vulnerability. They had both been abandoned in some way, left to fend for themselves in a world that didn't care. But why flowers? Who had left them? Ethan decided he couldn't just sit and wait for answers. He had to know the truth, even if it meant putting himself in the middle of something bigger than he understood. The morning air was crisp as Ethan sat on the steps outside the shelter, watching the city slowly come to life. Delivery trucks rumbled down the street, and the faint chatter of passers-by mixed with the hum of traffic. Yet his thoughts remained locked on the mystery surrounding the baby. Rachel stepped outside, carrying 2 steaming cups of tea. She handed one to Ethan before sitting beside him. "You've been quiet," she said, her tone gentle. Ethan wrapped his hands around the warm cup, staring into the rising steam. "I keep thinking about the flowers," he admitted. "And the person in the photo." Rachel nodded. "It's a lot to process. But you did your part, Ethan. You gave that baby a chance." Ethan's grip on the cup tightened. "It's not enough. Someone out there knows what happened, and I feel like I need to find them." Rachel looked at him, concern flickering in her eyes. "That's not your responsibility, Ethan. Let the police handle it." He didn't respond, his jaw set in quiet determination. Later that day, Officer Michael returned to the shelter, his demeanor brisk but approachable. "We've got some updates," he said, motioning Ethan and Rachel to join him at a table. Michael opened his folder, revealing new photos. "We've enhanced the surveillance footage. It's not perfect, but we've got a better look at the person in the alley." Ethan leaned in, his heart racing. The figure was clearer now. A woman, her face partially obscured by a scarf. Her body language seemed hurried, her movements tense. "She's carrying something," Ethan said, pointing to the screen. Michael nodded. "Most likely the baby. We're running this image through databases, but it'll take time." Ethan stared at the photo, a mix of curiosity and frustration gnawing at him. "What about the flowers?" Michael hesitated. "We traced the bouquet to a nearby florist. The shopkeeper remembers selling those flowers a few days ago but couldn't give us a name. We're following that lead, though." The officer closed the folder and leaned forward. "Ethan, I know this is weighing on you, but you've done more than enough. Let us handle the rest." Ethan nodded absently, but the determination in his eyes hadn't faded. That evening, Ethan slipped out of the shelter. The streets of Chicago felt colder and lonelier than usual, but he didn't care. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to find them sitting still. His first stop was the alley where he had found the baby. It looked the same, dim, cluttered with trash and broken crates. But now it felt heavier, as if the secrets it held were just out of reach. Ethan crouched near the spot where the baby had been. The faint scent of flowers was long gone, but he searched the area anyway, his fingers brushing against the cold pavement. Nothing. He stood, his breath visible in the frigid air. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he wasn't ready to give up. As he turned to leave, a voice startled him. "What are you doing here?" Ethan spun around to see a woman standing at the mouth of the alley. She was bundled in a heavy coat, her scarf pulled tightly around her neck. Her eyes were sharp, her expression guarded. Ethan stammered, his mind racing. "I was just passing through." The woman's gaze lingered on him, as if she were trying to read his intentions. "It's not safe here," she said finally. "You should go." Without another word, she turned and walked away, her figure disappearing into the shadows. Ethan stood frozen, his pulse pounding. Something about her felt off. Could she be connected to the baby? He made a mental note of her appearance and hurried back to the shelter, his thoughts spinning with new possibilities. Ethan barely slept that night, his mind replaying the encounter in the alley. The woman's guarded expression, her hurried tone, it all felt too coincidental. She had shown up at the exact spot where the baby had been abandoned. Could she have been the one who left it? The next morning, Ethan approached Rachel as she served breakfast in the shelter's kitchen. "I need to talk to Officer Michael," he said, trying to sound casual. Rachel looked at him curiously. "Did you remember something?" Ethan hesitated but nodded. "Kind of. I just think it might help." An hour later, Michael arrived, folding his coat over one arm as he entered the shelter. "What's on your mind, Ethan?" he asked, sitting across from the boy in the common area. Ethan fidgeted with the hem of his sleeve. "Last night, I went back to the alley," he admitted, bracing for a scolding. Michael frowned but didn't interrupt. "There was a woman there," Ethan continued. "She looked nervous, like she didn't want me to be there. She told me to leave and then disappeared." Michael leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. "Can you describe her?" "She was wearing a long coat and a scarf. I couldn't see much of her face, but her eyes, they looked sharp, like she was watching me the whole time. Michael's jaw tightened. Did you see which direction she went? Ethan shook his head. No, she just walked off into the dark. The officer nodded, jotting down notes. It might not mean anything, but we'll look into it. If you see her again, let me know immediately. Okay? Ethan nodded, though he doubted he'd be able to stay out of it if their paths crossed again. That afternoon, Dr. Claire Jensen was at the hospital when Michael called her. We've got a potential lead, he said, relaying Ethan's encounter with the woman. Claire frowned. A woman near the alley? If she's connected, why would she go back? Could be guilt. Or she's checking to see if anyone's onto her, Michael replied. Either way, I'm going to have a patrol sweep the area tonight. I'll let you know if we find anything. Claire hung up, her gaze drifting toward the neonatal unit. The baby was sleeping soundly, its tiny chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Hang in there, little one, she whispered. We'll find out who you are. That night, Ethan couldn't sit still. The shelter was safe and warm, but it felt stifling. He kept thinking about the woman, wondering if she'd return to the alley again. Despite Rachel's watchful eyes, Ethan slipped out after lights out. The cold wind bit at his cheeks as he retraced his steps to the alley. He wasn't sure what he was hoping to find. Maybe the woman, or some clue that had been overlooked. When he arrived, the alley was empty. The silence felt heavier than before, and the dim light of the street lamp cast long shadows on the walls. Ethan crouched near the spot where the baby had been, his fingers brushing against the cold ground. Then he froze. A faint scent of flowers lingered in the air. His pulse quickened as he stood, scanning the alley. Hello, he called, his voice barely above a whisper. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was her. The woman from last night stepped forward, her scarf pulled higher over her face. You again, she said, her voice low and tense. Ethan took a cautious step back. Why are you here? Her eyes darted around nervously. I could ask you the same thing. You don't belong here. Ethan swallowed hard. Neither do you. The woman hesitated, her posture stiff. I don't know what you think you're doing, kid, but you need to stay out of this. Stay out of what? Ethan pressed, his voice rising. Did you leave the baby here? Her sharp eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, she said nothing. Then, with a shaky breath, she whispered, It's not what you think. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the alley. The woman's head snapped toward the noise, her body tense. Don't follow me, she warned, before disappearing into the shadows once more. Ethan turned toward the footsteps, his heart pounding. A patrol officer stepped into view, his flashlight sweeping the alley. What are you doing here? The officer demanded. Ethan hesitated, unsure how to explain. I thought I saw something. The officer's stern expression softened slightly. This isn't a place for you to be wandering, kid. Let's get you back to the shelter. As the officer led him away, Ethan couldn't stop replaying the woman's words in his mind. It's not what you think. What wasn't she telling him? The next morning, Ethan sat in the shelter's common room, staring blankly at his untouched breakfast. The woman's warning echoed in his mind. It's not what you think. What had she meant? Every answer only seemed to bring more questions. Rachel sat down across from him, her voice gentle. You look like you didn't sleep at all. Everything okay? Ethan hesitated before nodding. Yeah, just a lot on my mind. Rachel studied him for a moment, then leaned in slightly. If there's something you need to say, Ethan, you can tell me. He opened his mouth to speak but stopped himself. He wasn't ready to share what had happened in the alley. Not yet. Later that day, Officer Michael returned to the shelter. His face was drawn, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something more urgent. Ethan, he said, motioning for the boy to follow him into the office. We've got new information, and I need you to take a look. Ethan followed, his chest tightening with anticipation. Michael laid a photo on the desk. It was a clearer image of the woman from the surveillance footage. Her scarf still obscured most of her face, but her eyes and part of her profile were visible. Is this the woman you saw in the alley last night? Michael asked. Ethan nodded immediately. That's her. Michael's jaw tightened. We've been able to identify her. Her name's Elizabeth Carter. She's a nanny who works for a family in the city. Ethan blinked, startled. A nanny? Then, why would she? That's what we're trying to figure out, Michael said. But here's where it gets strange. We contacted the family she works for, and they're claiming their baby is safe at home. They say they don't know anything about this abandoned child. Ethan's brow furrowed. So, if it's not their baby, whose is it? Michael sighed. That's the question. We're bringing Elizabeth in for questioning today. Ethan nodded, though his thoughts were racing. A nanny, a family with no missing child, and a baby left in an alley. It didn't add up. At the police station, Elizabeth Carter sat in a small interrogation room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Michael and another detective entered, their expressions neutral but focused. Miss Carter, Michael began, taking a seat across from her. We've identified you as the person in the surveillance footage near the alley where an abandoned baby was found. Can you explain why you were there? Elizabeth's eyes darted to the table, her voice trembling. I don't know what you're talking about. Michael placed a photo of her from the footage on the table. That's you, isn't it? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. I was there, but I wasn't abandoning a baby. Then what were you doing? The detective beside Michael asked, his tone sharper. Elizabeth's hands tightened into fists. I was trying to fix a mistake. Michael leaned forward. What mistake? Tears welled in Elizabeth's eyes, and her voice cracked as she whispered, It's not my baby. I found it in the house where I work. Both officers exchanged a glance, their interest piqued. Elizabeth continued, her words spilling out in a rush. I didn't know what to do. My employers didn't say anything about another child, and I was scared. I thought if I left it somewhere safe, someone would find it and take care of it. Michael frowned. You thought an alley in the middle of winter was a safe place? Elizabeth shook her head, her tears falling freely now. I panicked. I didn't know what else to do. The detective's voice softened slightly. You said you found the baby in their house. Where exactly? In the basement, Elizabeth replied. It was hidden in a box. I heard it crying and I just don't understand. They have a baby of their own. But this one, Michael sat back, his mind racing. Did you ask your employers about it? Elizabeth shook her head vehemently. I was too scared. They're not the kind of people you question. Michael exchanged another look with his partner, the pieces of the puzzle becoming more tangled. All right, Miss Carter, he said finally. We'll verify your story. But for now, you're not free to leave. At the shelter, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening. When Michael called him later that evening, his suspicions were confirmed. The woman from the alley, Elizabeth, says she found the baby in the house where she works, Michael explained. We're looking into the family now, but something doesn't feel right. Ethan's heart raced. What do you mean? Michael hesitated. She claims she was scared of the family, that she didn't feel safe asking them about the baby. Ethan thought about the baby's fragile body, the bouquet of flowers, and Elizabeth's panicked words in the alley. It all pointed to something darker than he had imagined. Ethan, Michael said, breaking the silence. I need you to trust us. We'll figure this out. But as Ethan hung up, he couldn't shake the nagging thought. What if they didn't figure it out in time? The following morning, Ethan woke with an unsettling weight on his chest. The pieces of the mystery, Elizabeth's confession, the hidden baby, the family who claimed ignorance, swirled in his mind like a storm. Something about it didn't sit right. At breakfast, Rachel noticed his quiet demeanor. You're carrying something heavy, Ethan, she said gently. Do you want to talk about it? Ethan shook his head. I'm fine, he muttered, though the lie sat awkwardly on his tongue. By mid-morning, Officer Michael called the shelter again. Rachel handed Ethan the phone, her expression curious but encouraging. Ethan, it's Michael, the officer said. We've been investigating the family Elizabeth worked for. You're not going to believe this. Ethan gripped the phone tighter. What is it? The family is refusing to cooperate. They won't let us search the property or speak to their staff. But there's something else. The baby in their home isn't registered. No birth certificate, no hospital records. It's like the child doesn't officially exist. Ethan's stomach dropped. So, what does that mean? It means we're dealing with more than neglect, Michael said grimly. This could be part of something much bigger. Meanwhile, at the police station, Elizabeth sat nervously in the interrogation room. Michael had just stepped out, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She stared at her trembling hands, replaying the moment she found the baby. She had been cleaning the basement when she heard the faint cries, barely audible over the hum of the furnace. Following the sound, she had discovered a box pushed into a corner. Inside was the baby, swaddled in an old blanket, its cheeks pale from the cold. Elizabeth shivered at the memory. She had panicked, terrified that her employers would find out she had discovered their secret. They had always been cold, aloof, particularly the wife, whose sharp eyes seemed to pierce through lies. When Michael returned, he placed a folder on the table and sat down across from her. "Miss Carter," he began, "you need to tell us everything you know about this family. Names, details, anything." Elizabeth hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. I don't know much. They don't talk to me unless they have to. But I know something's wrong in that house." Michael leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Elizabeth swallowed hard. "There are always deliveries boxes that go straight to the basement. And they never let me clean down there. The only reason I went was because the husband forgot to lock the door." Michael frowned. "Did you ever see what was in those boxes?" "No," Elizabeth said, her voice trembling. "But whatever it is, they're hiding something. And it's not just the baby." Back at the shelter, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the family. Who were they, and why were they hiding not one but possibly two babies? The idea gnawed at him, filling him with a restless energy he couldn't shake. That night, as the city settled into its usual rhythm, Ethan made a decision. He slipped out of the shelter, just as he had before, but this time his destination was different. He had overheard Michael mention the family's address during their last conversation. If no one else could get answers, maybe he could. The house stood at the edge of a quiet, upscale neighborhood. It was large and imposing, with high hedges that obscured much of the property. Ethan approached cautiously, sticking to the shadows. As he crept closer, he noticed something odd. A faint glow coming from the basement window. His heart raced as he crouched, peering inside. What he saw made his breath catch. The room was filled with boxes, each labeled with strange markings Ethan didn't recognize. In the center of the room stood a crib, and beside it, a woman paced nervously, her figure silhouetted against the light. Ethan's eyes narrowed. It was the same woman from the surveillance footage, Elizabeth's employer. She stopped pacing and looked toward the crib, her face illuminated for a brief moment. Her expression was strained, almost haunted. Ethan ducked down as she turned toward the window, his mind racing. Whatever was happening in that house, it wasn't normal. A low creak behind him made him freeze. Before he could react, a firm hand gripped his shoulder. "What do you think you're doing here?" a man's voice growled. Ethan's blood turned cold as he slowly looked up. Ethan's heart pounded as he turned to face the man gripping his shoulder. The sharp features of the figure above him were barely visible in the dim light, but the cold intensity in his eyes was unmistakable. I wasn't doing anything," Ethan stammered, trying to pull away. The man's grip tightened. "You're trespassing," he hissed. "And I don't think you're here by accident." Before Ethan could respond, the basement door opened. The woman he had seen pacing inside stepped out, her face tense. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice low but commanding. "I caught this kid snooping around," the man said, glaring at Ethan. The woman's eyes flicked between them, narrowing when they settled on Ethan. "Who are you?" Ethan hesitated, searching for the right words. I'm nobody. Don't lie to me," she snapped, stepping closer. "You didn't just wander into our property. What do you want?" Ethan's pulse quickened as he realized he had no escape. "I know about the baby," he blurted. The woman froze, her sharp gaze locking onto him. For a moment, The tension in the air was unbearable. Then she glanced at the man and said coldly, "Bring him inside." "No," Ethan protested, but the man's grip was unrelenting. He dragged Ethan toward the house, ignoring his struggles. The interior of the home was as cold and sterile as its exterior. The woman led the way into the basement, where the faint hum of machinery filled the air. Ethan's eyes darted around the room, taking in the rows of stacked boxes, the crib in the corner, and the faint scent of flowers that lingered in the air. The woman stopped and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "You've already seen too much," she said. "So let me make one thing clear. You don't understand what's happening here." Ethan forced himself to meet her gaze. "Then explain it to me. Why was the baby left in an alley? What are you hiding?" Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. Then she sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "We didn't abandon that baby," she said quietly. "Elizabeth took it without our permission. She misunderstood and panicked." Ethan frowned. "Misunderstood what?" The man cut in, his voice hard. "Enough. The less this kid knows, the better." "No," the woman said sharply, silencing him. She turned back to Ethan, her expression conflicted. "The baby isn't ours. It was left with us. Someone needed a place to keep it safe, and we agreed to help. But Elizabeth didn't trust us. She thought she was rescuing the child." Ethan's head spun. "Who left the baby with you? And why would they need to hide it?" The woman hesitated. "It's complicated," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "But if you care about that baby, you'll stop asking questions. The more you dig, the more danger you'll bring, to yourself and to the child." Ethan shook his head. "That doesn't make sense. If you wanted to keep the baby safe, why didn't you call the police?" Her face hardened. "Because not everyone can be trusted. And now, thanks to Elizabeth, the wrong people might start asking questions." Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't understand everything, but he knew one thing for certain. This family was hiding something far more sinister than they were letting on. The man stepped forward, towering over Ethan. "It's time for you to leave," he said. "Forget what you've seen here, and don't come back." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Take him out the back. Make sure no one sees him." Ethan was led through a side door, the man's grip firm on his arm. As they reached the edge of the property, the man leaned down and hissed, "This is your last warning, kid. Stay away." Ethan stumbled as the man shoved him toward the sidewalk. Without looking back, he ran, his heart racing. Back at the shelter, Ethan burst through the doors, startling Rachel. "Ethan," she exclaimed, "where have you been?" He couldn't find the words to explain. His thoughts were jumbled, his fear and frustration overwhelming. "I need to talk to Officer Michael," he said, his voice shaking. Rachel nodded, her concern evident. "I'll call him right away." When Michael arrived, Ethan told him everything about the woman, the man, and what they had said in the basement. Michael listened intently, his expression growing darker with every word. "This changes things," Michael said finally. "If they're telling the truth about someone else leaving the baby with them, we need to find out who and why. But it also means they're involved in something much bigger and more dangerous than we thought." Ethan's voice trembled as he asked, "What happens now?" Michael placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now we bring them in. And this time we're not giving them a choice." The next day, the police arrived at the family's home with a search warrant. Officer Michael stood at the front of the team, his expression hard as he knocked on the imposing front door. Ethan, though initially told to stay behind, had insisted on coming. From a safe distance, he watched anxiously, hidden behind the patrol cars lining the street. The door opened, revealing the man Ethan had encountered the night before. His face was stoic, but his clenched jaw betrayed his unease. "We have a warrant to search your property," Michael announced, holding up the document. The man hesitated for a fraction of a second, then stepped aside. "Do what you need to," he said coolly. As officers entered the house, the woman appeared at the top of the staircase, her expression a mix of anger and resignation. "This is a mistake," she called out. "You're wasting your time." Michael ignored her, directing his team to search the basement first. Ethan's heart pounded as he watched the officers descend into the house. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before Michael emerged, his expression grim. He approached the woman and man, holding a stack of papers and a small box. "We found these in the basement," he said, his voice sharp. "Would you like to explain why you have forged birth certificates and adoption records?" The woman's composure cracked for the first time. "We were trying to help," she said, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea what happens to children in the system?" "We were protecting them." Michael's eyes narrowed. "Protecting them by hiding them? By keeping them in secret?" The man interjected, his tone defensive. "You don't understand. These children were abandoned, unwanted. We gave them a chance." "And the baby in the alley?" Michael pressed. "What about that child?" The woman hesitated, then whispered, "That was never supposed to happen." Elizabeth didn't understand. "She panicked and ruined everything." Michael took a step closer, his voice cold. "Ruined what exactly? What are you really running here?" The woman's silence spoke volumes. Hours later, as the family was taken into custody, Ethan stood by Michael's side, watching the house grow quieter. Officers carried evidence out in boxes, and the cries of another baby, one still inside the house, echoed faintly from the distance. Michael turned to Ethan, his expression softer now. "You did good, Ethan. Because of you, that baby, and others are safe now." Ethan nodded, though a deep sadness lingered in his chest. "Why would they do something like that?" Michael sighed. "Sometimes people convince themselves they're doing the right thing, even when they're not. But the important thing is that it's over now." In the days that followed, the story made headlines. The family's actions, though cloaked in supposed good intentions, had endangered lives. The baby Ethan had saved was placed in the care of child services, where it would eventually find a loving home. But Ethan's life changed, too. His courage and determination caught the attention of more than just the authorities. One of the social workers involved in the case, a kind woman named Sarah, had been particularly moved by his story. Weeks later, as Ethan sat in the shelter's common room, Sarah appeared with a warm smile. "Ethan," she said, kneeling beside him, "I've been thinking, how would you feel about staying with me? About having a home?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You mean like being adopted?" Sarah nodded. "If you're ready, I'd like to give you a fresh start." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he nodded slowly. "I'd like that," he whispered. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something unfamiliar, hope.